Hi there, I'm Mary Susie from Bead Me a Story. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope everyone is doing great out there. And I am starting to get ready for the holiday season. So we are making icicles today. These icicles are made using the all locked up chain. And I will show you how to do that. That's this portion. And the rest of this is made just using basic jewelry techniques and just basic jump rings. So I think everyone will find this one fairly easy to make. And although the video is very long, this moves along really quickly. It's a fast and fun project to do, especially once you get the hang of this center part and how to do it. So the kit actually comes with 2 icicles in it to make. Because of all these descending order sizes, it just seemed worth it to give you 2 in that project. But I also am putting out some snowman earrings this week. These are just little glass pieces, and I had these little top hats for a while now. I wanted to use them. So I also have a kit this week that has snowmen, but I wanted to show that this week so that I can show you a little alternative to this icicle where you can add the snowman on top, and how you can just start to make these your own and add some different components that you have into it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the very first part that we're going to want to do to make this icicle is this body part. So you can see all the little sparkly pieces in here, and just seeing it, if you didn't know, I'm sure you would probably just think that this is shaggy loop chain, but it's not. So if you notice how the rings push out a little bit, this is a chain that I came up with quite a few years ago, and I call it all locked up. It is just a variation of the shaggy loop chain, but it pushes the rings out and gives them a little bit more dimension. And that's the whole purpose of this weave. So let me push this over to the side. And the first part we're going to do is just a plain old shaggy loop chain. And we're going to do that with descending rings. So you can see I've got 2, if we just look at this center row, I've got 2 rings that are 18 gauge 3/16. And then after that, I'm going down to 18 gauge 5/32 rings. Okay, so the 2 at the top are a little bit larger. That's to accommodate these 16 gauge jump rings that are up here in the square. So these are 16 gauge 5/16. Okay, these top 2. And then we're going to drop down with the squares to 18 gauge. So these are only 1.2 millimeters thick. So these can be accommodated with an 18 gauge 5/32 jump ring. So I have 2 rows of 1/4 inch in the square. I have 2 rows of 18 gauge 3/16. And then I have 2 rows of 18 gauge 5/32 in the square rings. And then you'll see I have 1 at the very bottom, and that's the little drop at the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and start working through this real quickly. So I'm going to take my jump ring. I'm going to pick up 2. So this is the 18 gauge 3/16. I'm going to pick up 2 of the 16 gauge 5/16 jump rings. So these are my largest jump rings. And all this beginning part should be real simple for you if you've done a shaggy loop chain before. Okay, and I went ahead and pre-closed my square rings just to make it a little faster. If you'd prefer to make the chain in the center and then add everything, that's fine with me. I just find this faster for videos so that I can move along a little bit more quickly. Okay, so once again, this is 18 gauge 3/16 with a 16 gauge 5/16. I'm going to pass through the previous row, and I'm going to pick up the second square wire jump ring. Okay, and I'm going to close. I have to really work those on. I guess I didn't open my jump rings quite enough, but it was just enough to fit them on. Okay, so I'm holding this upside down. At any point, I can flip this over. But can you see how flat these lay? So that's why we're going to do something later that's going to give them a little bit more body. Okay, so I'm going to kind of leave this flipped upside down as I work it. And remember, I'm adding with my round jump rings, and the square wire jump rings are the shaggy part. So now I've moved down to 18 gauge 5/32 jump rings, and I'm doing my 18 gauge 1/4 inch square rings on these rows. So I'm going to pick up one, pass through, pick up the other one. Okay, I'm going to close that ring, and I'm going to do the next row just the exact same way. 5/32, add a 1/4 inch. I just want to make sure when I do each row that I'm passing through in between the two shaggy rings, which are always the square rings in this design. Okay, picked up my second one, close. Still working all the center rows are going to be 5/32 now. But now my square rings are 18 gauge 3/16. Okay, and another row with 18 gauge 3/16. So that's 2 rows of those. You can see this moves along really quickly. This is not difficult. Shaggy loop is probably the easiest chainmail weave there is, and it's where I like to start teaching people. Okay, now we've got 18 gauge 5/32 in our round ring, and our square rings are now 18 gauge 5/32. So we're down to our smallest size. And I'm going to do 2 rows of that in shaggy loop chain style, just like we have been. And then my last row is just going to have 1 on it, and that's so that it comes to a point at the bottom. Oops, I forgot to pick up my square ring. So that's 18 gauge 5/32 square wire jump ring. Okay, and I'll close that. Okay, and then the last one. So on this last one, I'm just going to pick up 1 square wire 18 gauge 5/32 jump ring. I'm still passing through this jump ring in between the ones in this previous row. Okay, so just make sure you stay in between the shaggy jump rings. Okay, and if I flip this over, you can see that I have a nice, evenly balanced little cascade going down. It's largest at the top and smallest at the bottom. And this very bottom one is a square jump ring. Okay, so now that we have our entire shaggy loop chain in place and we have our, little descending shape, we're going to add all locked up to this. So all locked up is a shaggy loop variation that I came up with a few years ago. And basically what it does is just pushes these rings of the shaggy loop a little bit to the outside and gives them a little bit more body. So basically what I want to do, I'm going to actually not involve the very top row. Okay, so we're just these 2 16 gauge 5/16 that belong to the top row. We're going to ignore them completely, and they will not be involved in this process. Okay, so now we come down to the second row. Now the second row, I do want these rings to be involved. And what's going to happen is when we do all locked up, what we basically do is I'm going to come down to the center ring of the third row. So I'll be passing through above this 1/4 inch jump ring and passing through from left to right. And I'm going to pass through this third ring down in the center. And this is a second ring shaggy loop. Okay, so that's the second row down shaggy loop, third ring down in the center. And this first row, I'm going to do this with an 18 gauge 3/16. And I'm doing that just because it has to go around a 16 gauge jump ring in this case. So if you remember, my top 2 rows had 16 gauge jump rings in them. Okay, so I'm just going to simply pass through this center row. Okay, and then also just let it catch this 16 gauge 5/16 jump ring. And it's the one sitting beside it, so it's real easy to catch. Once you get the hang of this, this is very confusing to learn the first time around, but once you get the hang of it, it's really, really easy. Okay, so now I'm going to turn my piece around, and I'm going to do the same thing on the back side. So here's my top center jump ring. Here's my second center jump ring. See how those are the round jump rings? And now here's my third one down. And once again, I want the 18 gauge 3/16 jump ring. And just like before, I'm just going to pass through from left to right, and then let it also catch this 16 gauge 5/16 jump ring that's beside it. And that jump ring belonged to the second row. But since everything, you know, gravity works, so it's sitting beside the third row center. Okay? So we'll go through that with each row again. So now we're going to be working, that's all we're going to do. So we skipped these top two rings, and then you can see the additional rings that got hooked into our second set of shaggies. So now we're going to work on the third set of shaggies. So I want to go down to, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going down to the fourth jump ring, which is a round jump ring in the center row. And I'm going to pick up my jump ring. And this is now, from now on, we're going to be using 18 gauge 5/32. And I'm going to pass through this center ring over to my right, and over to my right is this square 18 gauge 1/4 inch jump ring. Okay, so it's the one that's right there. Okay, I'm going to close my jump ring. I'm going to turn it around to the back side. So, and I can see the ring I just added over here. So I'll just make sure that's over to my left-hand side. And then I'm going to take another one of these 18 gauge 5/32 jump rings. And once again, I'm going to pass through 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth jump ring down in the center. Go from left to right through that, and then through the square ring that's sitting right to its side, which happens to be an 18 gauge 1/4 inch square wire jump ring. Okay. Now we're going to come down to row 5 of the center. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the other thing I know is I'm going to be catching another 1/4 inch jump ring. Okay, so I'm looking for the row, the center row that sits below the last 1/4 inch jump rings. Okay, and I'm on the fifth jump ring down in the center. I'm going to pass from left to right, and then through this square wire jump ring that's sitting right beside it. This is only confusing to learn because you're passing through, let's say you're passing through row 3 and you're grabbing a shaggy loop from row 2. But that shaggy loop, remember, is hanging down right next to the row that you're working on. So don't let it all confuse you. Once you get the hang of this, it'll be easy as pie. It's just people tend to overthink this one. Okay, so this is my fifth jump ring down in the center. I'm going from left to right, and then through the square wire jump ring that's beside it, and I can see that that's a 1/4 inch. And that's what I wanted to catch. Okay. And now I'm going to be on the 6th row down. And the other thing I know, I've caught 2 rows of 1/4 inch now. So now I know I'm going to be catching 3/16 jump rings. And I can kind of see the sizes here, that this row is 3/16 and that this square row is 3/16. So I know I'll be going through the bottom row of 3/16 as far as where the center jump ring is. So I'll be above this square wire jump ring, and I'll be catching the 3/16 jump ring that's to the right of it. Okay. And I'm flipping this over so I can see here's my ring back here that I just added. And now I'm going to go through this center row. I'm on the 6th jump ring down in the center. And I'm passing through that center jump ring and then grabbing the square jump ring that's sitting to the side of it. Okay. And now that was, I grabbed 18 gauge 3/16 square wire jump rings, and I'm going to do that again. But now I'll be working on the 7th row down, which has 18 gauge 5/32 square jump rings attached to its sides. Okay, but I'm not involving those right now. I'm passing through above one of those, and I'm grabbing this 18 gauge 3/16 square jump ring that belonged to the shaggy in the row above it. Okay, this may take you a few times, but I promise it's really easy once you understand it. It's a hard thing to explain, but this weave is really, to me, essential. Okay, going through the center and the square jump ring again. It's really essential because it pushes your work out and gives it a little bit of dimensionality. So for sculptural things where you need a little bit more than just a shaggy loop, this can give you that extra body that you need. Okay, and now I have done both. I have grabbed both rows of 3/16. So now the next row down, I'll be grabbing 5/32 square jump rings. So we're just adding 2 jump rings to each row. One on the front and one on the back of that center row. And it grabs one of the shaggy jump rings that belongs to the row above it. That's all we're doing. Okay. And 2 more. So the reason I did this little point at the bottom was so that we could complete the all locked up all the way through this last row. And then this little bottom square ring just hangs off. But this gives me a round jump ring right here so that I can grab this bottom row of 18 gauge 5/32 square wire jump rings to complete this pattern with 2 rows of each size. Okay, and 1 more jump ring. Okay, and see how this is my bottom round jump ring. I'm just passing through from the left to right and then through the square wire jump ring that's sitting right beside it. Okay, and that is it. So that is this whole center section that you see in our icicle, made a little bit more dimensional and a little bit more sparkly by adding the all locked up to it. And now we're going to go about putting this all together. So before I do anything else, I'm just going to show you that to kind of finish off the top of this. Okay, I'm going to leave this on its paper clip. until I go ahead and reopen this jump ring that's at the top. And this will eventually link into one of the eye pins that belongs to one of the pearls. Okay, so we'll just leave this on its paper clip so it's ready to go as we start building our icicle. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start preparing our pearls. So this top pearl, this could be I believe this is 14 gauge, or 14 millimeter, but this really could be a 14 or a 16 millimeter pearl, okay? And then we're gonna have two 10 millimeter pearls, an 8 millimeter, a 6 millimeter, and a 4 millimeter, okay? And the 4 millimeter is gonna go onto a head pin. So let's just go ahead and do that one now. Now, I just want to stress to you, this is all going to get covered up with jump rings. You do not have to be good at wire work to do this particular project, okay? So don't sweat the small stuff. If you're horrible at wire wrapping, fine. It really doesn't matter. You'll be just fine. Okay, so I'm just taking my wire. You can see I put the head pin through. I bent the wire to 90 degrees. And then I'm going to take a pair of round nose pliers. I'm going to kind of get this loop started. See, I'm already starting badly. So, you know, I don't mind doing this badly for you because, like I said, it's not going to matter. We're going to cover up all these loops that we're doing. So don't even worry if they're ugly. Okay, so I wrap this around so you can see it forms a loop. And I'm just going to hold it in place while I take the wire and I wrap it around a few times. Okay, so this bottom one is permanent. Okay, we can't open that back up because we wrapped it. And that's fine because we're working with a 4 millimeter bead is pretty tiny. So we don't want that bottom to fall off. Okay, so there's our bottom pearl. Now, the rest of the pearls we're going to do with eye pins. Okay, so the eye pin already has one loop on it, and then we just need to make the other loop. Do we need to make it the same size? No, probably not. I mean, it really isn't going to matter. Okay, so just really do not sweat this part. I'm going to put my eye pin through a pearl. I'm going to take one of my flat nose or chisel nose pliers. Okay, I'm going to bend it at about 90 degrees, but if you can't get it all the way there, that's okay. Okay, I'm just guesstimating as far as cutting this off. Not even gonna worry about it. I know, probably a little over 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm going to work this into a loop. Okay, now if your loop is like huge compared to the other side, and I mean really just out of sorts, like this is a little bit bigger, but that's fine, okay? But if it's like huge, you know, obviously cut this down a little bit and make that loop a little bit smaller. Otherwise, if they're different, don't even worry about it. It's not gonna matter in the end because we're gonna cover it all up. Okay, so let me get some more eye pins here. I'll show you that again. Okay, pop that through. Take a flat nose or a chisel nose plier. Bend the wire back. Cut it to about wherever you think you need. And then take your round nose pliers and make a loop. Okay. And that one's a lot bigger. Okay, so I'm going to trim that off. So I'll show you. If it's a whole lot bigger and you're just like, okay, those just aren't even in the same ballpark, I'm going to nip off the end and I'll just push that in a little bit further. Okay. And I am going to end up opening these up to link things together. Okay. I just wanted to kind of show you this whole process. Here's my size 8 millimeter pearl. Bend. See, we're almost done with these. So the less you think about this and the more you just go ahead and do it, the better off you're going to be. And the only way to learn to do really good eye pins is to just do more of them. So this is a great practice project because it doesn't, we're going to cover it all up and it doesn't really matter. See, that one was way too big. Cut that down a little bit more. So like I said, if it's just way out of proportion, nip it off a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. I'm not making these pretty. They're ugly. But I'm doing them fast and I'm not worrying about their shape because I'm going to cover them up with jump rings. And now here's my final one. This is the 6mm. I've been making those too big, so I'm going to come in a little bit more. Okay. And there we have it. Okay, so these are all our pearls that we're going to need. And so basically now we can start linking this whole thing together. So you can see the 4mm pearl is just going to get attached to the 6mm pearl. So in order to open one of these up, I'm just going to bend this wire off to the side. I'm going to bend it just enough to get this loop through the loop of the 4mm pearl. Okay, and now those are linked together. And now I'm going to take my 8mm pearl. I'm just going to link that through the top loop of the 6mm pearl. Close that. And then I'm going to take one of my 10mm pearls. Okay, see how I'm just swinging this to the side? It's just open just enough. I'm going to link through that 8mm pearl loop. Okay, so see, I just have, see how it's largest to smallest now? And now we are going to add in this part that we made, our all locked up part. So in order to do that, I'm just going to go to the top of my 10mm pearl. I'll open that loop up and I'm going to hang this down. Just make sure that I am passing through that square ring that's at the bottom. And I may even want to grab it with my pliers just so it might be easier to get it onto this loop. Okay, and I close that loop back. Oh, look at us, now it's really growing. Okay, and then I'm going to take this off of the paper clip. I'm going to come in with another 10mm pearl. Just tilt that off to the side. And like I said, you know, a lot of times when you're trying to get these onto these little loops, it can be easiest if you just hold it with your pliers, because sometimes you don't give yourself enough space. You don't want to, you know, swing that to the side too much, but okay, link that on. Now we're going to close this back. Okay, we're just tilting that back to the side to bring it back. And then we're going to add our top one. This is our 14mm pearl that we're adding here. Okay, and then finally, at the very tippy top, we're going to add a jump ring. And this jump ring is really just so that you have something to put your hanger through. So whether you want to use, I use chenille stems a lot to attach to my Christmas tree branches, because then it's just like a wire that I can actually wrap around the branch a few times. Or if you want to add a hanger to this, you certainly can, but putting a nice size jump ring, so this was an 18 gauge 3/16, putting a nice size jump ring at the top where you could string a ribbon through, or a hanger, or whatever you need to do to hang your ornaments, you know, you can go ahead and do that there. Okay, so that is most of it. And then you can see, I will be back in 1 second. We're just going to add our jump rings to cover up all of our loops. Okay, so here we are at the final step of this, and I'm going to start adding, these are all square 18 gauge 5/32 jump rings. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is just go around this section that has the links in it. So you can see that I'm above that 4mm pearl and below the 6mm pearl, and I'm just putting these in that section where there's loops. Okay, so there's one. I just close that. There's two. Okay, here's a third one. Now, as we move up and it gets a little bit tighter, you may need to open your jump rings a little bit more to get that to go around. And that's fine. These are pretty sturdy, the square wire jump rings. They're a little bit heftier than the round ones. Okay, so I'm just going to take this. Here's a fourth one. Okay, see how it's around this loop in here? Okay, so there's four, and that might be good, but let me try and squeeze in a fifth one. I think I had 6 on this other one I have. So, you know, it depends on how big you made your loops. I mean, if you made them gigantic, you're going to have to keep filling in more and more and more. But I think if we hold this up, I'm not really seeing much. I can try for one more. We'll try for a 6th one. Let's see if we can fit it. If we can't, it's okay. I think it looks pretty good. And this is where I said you may very well need to, like, really, this last one, trying to get it through, you might have to open it a whole bunch. Oh, and fit that around there. Once you get it around this loop, you're fine. It's just getting it to slide around in the first place. And there we go. There's 6 on this bottom one. Okay. And then we're on this next section. So now I'm between the 6th and the 6mm and the 8mm, but we're still just doing the same thing. I'm just hooking around the loop. Okay. And then I'm going to take another one, and I'm going around the loops, staying between the 6mm and the 8mm pearls. Okay. And I'm just filling this in. So I just want to mention here, there's a lot of ways that you can do this. This is a very simple step, but you could actually be adding the round wire jump rings in these areas, and you could actually interlink them or make little rosettes to make this look a little bit different. And you know, you could attach little beads to them. You can do all sorts of things here. This is a simple technique, but it's one that you know, you can do a lot more with if you think about it, and obviously you'd be able to do it in different colors and things like that if you really wanted to. Let's see, I did 4 on mine, but let's see if we're able to squeeze a 5th. Maybe not. Nope, 5th is not gonna fit. Okay, so I think we're good here, and that's what I had on this original one that I did. So now we're just gonna move up to the next row. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going, adding these orbitals all the way up, covering all of the links we did. We're covering these with aluminum jump rings, and the aluminum jump rings are not going to tarnish ever, whereas the brass that we used in our head and eye pins can tarnish over time. So it's great that we're covering them all up, because then you don't really have to worry about anything, and you're going to take this out every year, year after year, and it should look sparkly and pretty and be able to go right onto your tree again. Okay, so that's all there is to this. You'll notice I also did a couple on this part. I didn't need quite as many because this didn't link to another bead, so it didn't have 2 links in it, it just had 1. And then I put some up at the top of my all locked up section, just 2, and then a bunch here. And that is all there is to it, and you will have a finished icicle. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this. I love creating all of the holiday fare each year. I think it's a lot of fun. I thought this one turned out really pretty. Plus, I was able to teach you one of the skills that I really enjoy teaching to everyone, because this is a weave that I came up with on my own, or you know, a derivative of the shaggy loop that I came up with on my own. And I use this a lot with rubber rings as well as with metal rings and with beads. And it's a really great trick to know, particularly when you're adding beads to something. It really pushes them to the outside of what you're doing and gives it a little bit of dimensionality. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make this, and I hope you'll try it. Try the kit for this. Big reason to get a kit with something like this is all the different sizes. Of course, if you buy all the components individually, it costs a lot just because it's a descending size thing. But we do have kits for this, so you can pick those up at beadmeastory.com, and I sure hope you will. And make sure you check out some of our other holiday ornaments we have available for you. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.